Okay, good evening, actually, everyone, and welcome to today's briefing at the Jerusalem Press Club. My name is Talia Dekel. The Israeli political system took yet another turn last night as Benny Gantz announced his party's withdrawal from the emergency unity government formed for the war. This is the second party to leave since its formation, after Gideon Sa'ar disbanded from Gantz in March. Joining us now is MK Sharren Haskel from Sa'ar's New Hope, Hayamin HaMamlachti party. Haskel previously served as a member of Knesset for the Likud, where she left for the New Hope party, which splintered off and joined the opposition. Hello, Ms. Haskel, and thank you very much for giving us the time today. I know that you're very busy, you're in the middle of a session, and you might actually have to cut out to vote. So hopefully that won't happen in the middle.
Yeah. Hi, Talia. Thank you so much for inviting me here. And I look forward to have like a good discussion.
So first of all, maybe we can just go to the most recent political event. What your thoughts on Benny Gantz's moves are and what this means in your opinion?
Um, it was very much predicted, but it's still a bit disappointing. When we resigned a couple of months ago, his claim was that nothing's wrong and whatever is not broken doesn't need to be fixed. And yesterday was a full proof that it doesn't work. It didn't work. A lot of the mistakes, a lot of the decisions that were made in the last few months, we know today better that they were great mistakes as well. And so, yeah, I have to say it's quite disappointing, but we saw it coming, a couple of months ago already.
What do you think this means in terms of how the world is viewing Israel right now? What message does it give Israel's enemies? What message is it giving global leaders who are trying to persuade Israel into a ceasefire, which I'm assuming that your party has its own doubts about?
Yeah, well, each one resigned for different reasons. And, I know how it's being perceived overseas, and I know people try to label this war as if it is Netanyahu's war, which is completely wrong. This is Israel's war. This is Israel's second independent war. And obviously it's not easy. I mean, us in the New Hope Party, we've said that if they will make the right decisions, we will give them support and, sort of an umbrella of stability to make those right decisions. If Netanyahu has been criticized for anything in the last 4 months from our side, is that he didn't start the operation in Rafah earlier to release our hostages. We knew Hamas is not going to agree to a deal. We knew that before. We knew that the only reason why he agreed to a deal in the first place was military pressure on Hamas. And so the fact that there has actually been for 4 months a quiet ceasefire has actually pushed back our ability to bring our family members back home, our hostages, but it also gave a leverage for Hamas to start rebuilding its operation in the center and in the north. And we've criticized him for not bringing the Rafah and the Philadelphia crossing operation quite earlier.
So just allow me to understand, this is currently Israel's seemingly most right-wing government in its history. How does having left the unity government at a time of war, especially when your criticism seem to come from a more hawkish angle and not doing enough on the war, make sense at the end of the day? Wouldn't it have made more sense to stay and make more pressure from the inside as opposed to leave and stay in opposition?
So two things about that. First of all, it might be a right-wing government, but their policies, it seems like something different. Okay. Now, obviously, there wasn't much oversight or, let's say, that legal decision maker in the sense that where it used to be, usually these decisions used to be in the general cabinet and not a war cabinet. And so, there's somewhat to say about that as well. Matter of fact is, yes, maybe we might be more hawkish, but I think that the vast majority of Israelis, it's not that they're hawkish, is that we want to bring back the safety and the security to our children. And if we do not eliminate Hamas, then they will forever be at the risk of being murdered, raped, burnt alive. And so, when we understand that the moves that they've been doing in the 4 months will not achieve that goal, which means that the risk and the threat on our children and our country is still very much alive and actually is growing, we'll criticize it. And that's where most of the Israeli public is, no matter what government and what leadership is in power, whether it's right or left. If there's one thing that all Israelis understand that we have to maintain and safeguard is our deterrence and our security, because we cannot exist in this very tough neighborhood if we don't have it. And unfortunately, the last 4 months and the way the war cabinet, and that's including Gantz and Netanyahu, have operated the war cabinet is by making bad decisions.
Understood. And now we're really left with a much more narrow government without any kind of balance. We've been hearing talk today and last night about the fact that the Americans might be moving on with the ceasefire deal for American hostages, dual citizens of Israel, without Israel, if Israel continues in its current path. Is that something that you would support? Is that something that you see feasible in your thinking?
So I'll say it, and I'm very cautious about what I'm saying, but look, matter of fact is that Israel's and the United States have an unbreakable bond. And it is an unbreakable bond because it's based on 3 pillars. The first one is the people to people. The Israeli public and the American public really love, cherish, and they have a very strong bridge and relationship. The second pillar is the parliament to parliament, meaning the Knesset to the Senate and the House of Representatives, where we have a very close relationship and a lot of cooperation. And the third one is the government to government. Even if our government to government do not agree, or the Israeli public, with some of the government decisions that are being made in America, this bond is still unbreakable and is very, very strong. Our alliance is very, very strong. So, as much as we may disagree with some of the way the American presidency have pushed certain issues. Okay, we may disagree. At the end of the day, our government and our leadership have to make the decision that's going to be right for our people. Okay. And that's what you see what we're doing, including the entrance to Rafah, including the release of 4 hostages on Saturday. We will continue to defend and do what's necessary to make sure that our people are safe.
One journalist is asking for your thoughts on what will actually happen next on the political front, and what would be the best case scenario for your own party. Netanyahu still has 64 members of Knesset on his side, despite Gantz's move yesterday. So, what is the next step in your eyes? Is elections the way to go? How is that helpful? Who will be able to form a government if that were to actually occur?
So the first thing is that Netanyahu's government is not at risk of being dismantled. Even though Gantz has resigned, he still has 64 hands or 54 representatives, which are a big majority here in Israel. So it's important to note that, because some people are saying now the government's going to fall, but politically it's incorrect. Okay. what do we think? We think that as the New Hope Party, we think that we need to schedule the elections, and we've suggested a date. Gidon Sar, the head of my party, has suggested January because the IDF has declared this year as a year of war and combat. We do not think that we can or should go into elections when our soldiers and our troops are in the front line fighting shoulder to shoulder. I think the next elections in Israel are going to be very divisive, and even furthermore than what we've seen until now. And if we go into election, it means that we've stopped the war. There isn't a way to continue the war while Israel is in elections. So if we see the full fronts continuing, we will have to postpone the elections, but we still need to set a date, which is an earlier date than what it was scheduled. But if Netanyahu continues, let's call it with a quiet ceasefire and not responding, then it might really be the time to change the leadership in our eyes. And so we will start working towards an election.
You mentioned soldiers fighting shoulder to shoulder, but this is, of course, not entirely across the board in Israeli society, and really one of the main points of division coming out even more now. Do you see the issue of the ultra-Orthodox draft coming up as something that can eventually bring down the government? And what is your party's opinion on that?
Yeah, so I think that one of the only option, I mean, there's probably about 3 different options to go into elections. One of them is the recruitment bill, which means that the ultra-Orthodox community will need to start serving in the army like any other citizen here in Israel, or like the majority of the citizens in Israel, because Muslims and Christians are not forced to join the military, only if they volunteer to. It creates a big tear within this coalition, as there isn't a draft bill that can actually pass in this current coalition. There's a bill that they are going to pass today, and I see it passing, but it needs to go through the committees, and it needs to go through a second and third calling the General Assembly voting. The ultra-Orthodox want to take this bill and soften it. The rest of the coalition, which understand the necessity of our armies, we need manpower, okay, in our front lines. So they want to actually expand it. I think this will create a big debate, and what we will see is that this bill will not come into a full legislation because of those 2 parts in the coalition. And then not during this term, but maybe in the next term, when subpoenas to call for the recruitment of the ultra-Orthodox will be sent to them, and they will have to be recruited. Otherwise, it will just harm them financially. I mean, you can't really recruit them by force, but you can cut down social benefits that they've received until now, like monthly allowance and subsidizing their studies in the yeshivas and things like that. When that starts to happen, then you'll see a start of a breakdown in this government. So yeah.
So then that really means that the next government to form, if there's a desire to keep it stable, that might essentially mean not having the ultra-Orthodox in the government, which is an entirely different discussion. There is a question from the New York Times as regarding your opinion on whether your party will ultimately accept an offer to join Netanyahu's government should he offer a seat to Mr. Sar or other party members on the war cabinet, which was one of the points of friction in the past, and whether or not you can confirm that there has been talks on the matter with Netanyahu or his office or otherwise.
So, it's important to say we're not Netanyahu's spare wheel. Gidon Sar has put an offer to be in the cabinet to try and shift what had happened there. Okay, when we saw that the policy that they made there was the wrong one, which took us in the wrong path, he wanted to get in order to be able to, affect it and to change it. What you see now, there's not going to be a war cabinet, okay? And sitting in in the bigger cabinet with quite a few inexperienced voices that sits there as well is going to be a complete chaos. If we go in, is it going to be effective? Absolutely not. And so we're not going to be in a place where we don't have the power to make decision and to change this decision. And so if there's an offer to be in the war cabinet, it will be declined. I mean, I'm sure Netanyahu probably sent messages. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure he would be very happy with it. But this offer is not no longer on the table. But at the same time, I have to say, we have publicly said it. If Netanyahu will start making the right decision, we will support him from the opposition. So from the outside, we are a patriotic opposition. We are not just an opposition to be an opposition. We want to see Israel win this war because this is going to dictate the future of our children, of our nation. And it really is going to dictate whether we can survive in the Middle East. So if they completely switch their moves and start making the right decisions, they'll receive our support from the outside. They don't need us sitting inside.
That's very clear, and we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you one last follow-up question. Fast forward to 2025. In fact, if we do have elections in January or whenever, and assuming that the ultra-Orthodox aren't going to be a party that you're able to sit in government with because of the issues that you have over the draft. What are the other parties? Which are the other ideologies that you think that you are able to align with? Would you see yourselves together with Ben Gvir Smotrich's party, or would you be seeking alliances with Naftali Bennett should he choose to return, or even Israel Beitenu?
You mean before the elections or after the elections?
Before coming together, but yeah.
Okay. So it's very uncertain now. But what we do know is that the next elections are going to change a lot of things in Israel. We cannot go back to what was until now. We understand that this probably will need to form a lot of unity in order to overcome a lot of challenges that were formed in the last few months. We understand that if we want to change the leadership, which is what we believe is right for Israel, we will need to form a very big party on the right side of the map to compete with Netanyahu. And it's only us that can actually create that. If it will be formed, I think we can give a good fight and we might be able to change the leadership. I think if there's going to be too much fighting and people will not want to join forces together, to be honest, I can see how Netanyahu will be elected again. So it's, what we do before these elections are going to dictate a lot. Gideon Sa'ar, time after time, put his ego on the side and was brave enough to make decisions that were right for the future of Israel and right for the future of our people. He still is like that. He will forever be like that. That's the type of person he is. So I can't talk if there's any specific discussions about it, but I think they got that message that we need to form something bigger.
Okay, very clear, and obviously a much larger message there, and in between the lines about the need for unity in the nation right now. MK Sharren Haskel, thank you so much for your time, and good luck with the votes later today. And may we have more good news the rest of this week.
Thank you very much, Talia.
Goodbye.